Hello, this is Anna, and I want to welcome you to part 11 of the central nervous system's PowerPoints. And we are going to be looking at the cerebrum's association areas. All right, so again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time reading my note slides to you, so you have the information on them. So with these multimodal association areas, so basically, this is where you're going to be integrating different areas to work together, okay? And if you're looking to figure out what's an association area, if it doesn't have the word primary in it, which is most of the cortex, then it's not, then it's an association area, okay? This is where you actually do the bulk of your processing and integration of the information, okay? So for example, your primary sensory area is going to take the input. The association area next to it is going to be first level processing. Then it's going to send information both to the motor cortex and to other sensory areas. So the motor cortex so that it can decide if it wants to move something. And then the other sensory association areas for second level processing so that you can do other things with that information, okay? We're going to divide these multimodal association areas into three basic broad divisions. The anterior, which is going to be this whole area done in light pink, which is the prefrontal cortex. This is our most complicated region. This is the area that's most developed in humans that's different from other non-human primates and other animals. So it's very complex. This is the seat of our personality, working memory, abstract planning, reasoning, judgment, all of that good things. Okay? It will be linked to our limbic system, all right, so that you can work on your mood, judgment, behaviors, all kinds of stuff. All right, let's look at the next slide. All right, the posterior division is going to include temporal, parietal, and occipital lobes. And this is where you're going to recognize patterns, faces, get a whole picture of something. We've got language sub-areas, okay? And then the third broad division is going to be the limbic areas, which we've already talked about in another video. And that's going to include cingulate gyrus, hippocampus, all right, those areas, and deals with emotions and memories. All right, next slide. All right, let's talk about those language association areas just a little bit more. I've already mentioned them in other discussions, so we're just going to talk about it a little bit more. So the one we talked about in the last video was the Broca's area right here, okay? And then we've got, remember with language, we're not only making sounds, we're also processing visual language, whether it's in writing or body language. And we're also dealing with the auditory component, so the sound of language. So also involved in language is going to be the primary auditory cortex. And then for making sounds, we've got the speech centers of the primary motor cortex in here, okay? And then we've got the Wernicke's area, which is also only a left side thing. Okay, actually these are really focusing. So language is concentrated in the left side. Obviously, I have an auditory cortex on both sides and so forth. But the other things are kind of just on the left. So we got the Wernicke's. This is an association area that goes with it. And then remember, you're processing visual information as well, whether it's body language or written language. And so you will be involving your primary visual cortex as well. Now, one of the things that's interesting is when you look at language and how it works, and when they start doing MRIs of brains and looking at blood flow or other components of these particular scans, you can see how the brain is affected by different types of language. So you can see with hearing language, it's really concentrating in the area near those auditory processing areas, but then it's also going to employ some of these areas. If you're seeing words, the visual cortex, the association areas get really emphasized. If you're thinking about what you want to say, but you aren't actually saying it yet, that prefrontal cortex is heavily involved. And when you're actually making word sounds, you are heavily using that premotor cortex and the Broca's area, which is kind of like right about there. All right. All right. So when we're trying to understand the body, sometimes it's interesting to look at things when they go wrong, or they don't work the way we would typically expect it to. And that can give us interesting insights to how the body works. So stuttering is an interesting one, and it can be broken up into developmental versus psychogenic versus neurogenic, all right? Definitely a genetic component to it. The neurogenic is where you've got a disconnect between the brain and the muscles that control speech, all right? And this is typically associated with an injury to the cerebrum, okay? Psychogenic is very rare, and it seems to be associated with mental illness or stress. More common is going to be the developmental, which is the one that most kids are dealing with, and it starts around age 2 to 5. Most kids are going to outgrow it. And basically what's going on is that the nervous system isn't fully developed, and so it's really not quite ready to deal with the demands of language, all right? And you've got some asymmetries going on, and you may have some overactive dopamine secretions, and this impacts the ability to make your word sounds. And the reason most kids outgrow it is because eventually the nervous system catches up, okay? And then I just list some treatments, and I put a whole bunch of pictures of people who dealt with stuttering in their lives. Another area where you can look at language and try to understand how the brain works is to look at the disability of aphasia. All right, so this is where there's a language deficit, usually due to some kind of lesion in the Wernicke or Broca's area. So we can break it up into non-fluent aphasia versus fluent aphasia. So non-fluent is where you're going to be affecting the Broca's area, and you see these particular symptoms with slow speech and so forth. Whereas if the Wernicke's area has experienced a stroke, all right, speech can be normal and excessive, but a lot of senseless words, all right? And what's interesting is that they have a difficult time comprehending written and spoken words. And then there's anomic aphasia, where you can speak and understand, but you can't identify written words or pictures, which is also kind of interesting. And there are others, and this is like an oversimplification, but it's still kind of interesting to look at and think about. All right, that is the end of this particular video. Thank you for watching.